Welcome everyone. We're going to let everyone join us and we'll get started in just a moment with the partnership's COVID-19 Houston Business Forum. All right, well, thank you all for joining us this afternoon. Again, the partnership is hosting its COVID-19 Houston Business Forum series on Tuesdays and Thursday during the lunch hour, and we're pleased that you're able to join us again today. Our discussion today will take a deeper look at the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, or the FFCRA, and we'll also get an update on the Texas Workforce Commission's programs for employers. So let's just take another second to let the rest of our audience join us. We've got a little over 100 people on the call right now. Okay, great. For many of you, you have joined us in the past for these webinars, and I just want to remind those that may be new that all of our webinars are recorded and can be found on our website at houston.org coronavirus. So you have an opportunity to see this on demand as well. Some of our other resources, just to make you aware of, are the houston.org coronavirus site. That's kind of our main page that we're keeping updated with all the information and status on COVID-19. But we also added last week our Greater Houston Business Recovery Center, and that's at houston.org recovery. This information will assist you with planning your next steps, including recovery resources, federal lending programs, local business assistance, and information about changes to laws and regulations. So we do update that daily, if not hourly. The partnership, a new announcement, we are restarting our business resource groups. BRGs are our gathering groups for leadership, professional, and business development. And we have 9 of those here at the Greater Houston Partnership. If you're a member of the partnership currently or are looking to be in the future, feel free to subscribe to one of those BRG groups. We have a BRG event tomorrow for business development, sales and marketing professionals, and we'll be conducting those on a regular basis now starting tomorrow. If you are not subscribed, you can reach out to our membership team at member.engagement@houston.org. This team is also available to answer any other questions you might have at this time, so please do use that as a resource. Of course, we still continue to share our daily briefing emails that you will be getting in your inbox, and economic development updates on a regular basis, as well as we strongly encourage you to view and subscribe to our LinkedIn group for the partnership. This is where members can share where they may have a need or they may have something to offer to other members or the business community. So please feel free to jump on that LinkedIn group. Thanks. For a show of hands, we're going to do something a little bit differently right now. At the bottom of your screen, you can use the icon to raise your hand virtually. I would just like everyone to kind of test that mode out. And the team behind the scenes, if you can raise your hand if you have been through this drill with me before, I'm going to read through some housekeeping tips, but if you already have a lot of experience on Zoom, I won't go through those in quite the detail. I want to raise your hand if you've been on one of our webinars. Looks like we've got 30 and growing. Quite a few of you. Okay, we'll keep looking at that. I won't go into as much detail about how we run our webinars, but again, the features on your screen are very helpful in how we conduct. We use the chat feature ultimately just for your comments, and if you have any questions for our team behind the scenes, as well as if you're having any technical difficulties. we use the Q&A tab. The difference here is for questions directed to our speakers for the day. And that Q&A tab we will continue to use, and we will look at for questions at a post-event when we go into the moderated session. So use the Q&A tab for that. Also, feel free to use your view options button at the top of or bottom of your screen to adjust the view that you're seeing here today. So thank you for that. Also, I just want to mention that we are going to be conducting things just slightly differently today in terms of Q&A. We are actually and have built-in scenarios. So our presenters will run through quite a few scenarios actually that they have already experienced from companies in Houston. And we may be able to answer many of your questions in that scenario process. So let me go ahead and get started. We have three wonderful speakers, presenters today. I want to welcome back Michael Gutierrez. He joined us 2 weeks ago for an employment and workforce considerations webinar. He's got some new updates to share with us today on the shared work and work in Texas programs. And then we have our friends from Insperity. Jeff Sorrells is the Senior Human Resources Specialist, and Bonnie Monych is our Performance Specialist. They are here to talk about the FFCRA, and also we'll run through several of those scenarios I had just mentioned. So we'll go ahead and get things started with Michael. And Michael, if you want to join us, great. All right, it's all yours, Michael.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Carrie. I really want to just dive in. So if we don't mind going to the first slide. We're going to be jumping into some different topics. I wanted to start with the TWC Shared Work Program. For some of you individuals that have been having instances of needing to, whether it's furlough staff or unfortunately lay off staff, we really want the employers to think about some resources that could help them get through this time. For any businesses that have slowed down due to the pandemic, and they need to reduce employees' hours, we would really like them to take a look at the shared work program that can supplement those wages. Now, what's really, really important about this program is that there is a sweet spot that you're gonna have to obtain with the amount of hours that your workers are affected by. So you want to identify the individuals whose work hours have been affected by at least 10%, but not more than 40. So I've had some employers recently reach out to me and ask, hey, so should I just make all of my, reduce all of the hours by 20% so we can take part in this program as a whole? One of the suggestions that I would give the employer is the moment you reduce hours or salaries by 20%, that automatically enacts that employee to qualify for straight unemployment benefits. So you may have some individuals that are hearing in the media how much money they'll be receiving via unemployment, and they may make the decision that they don't want to participate on the shared work program. They're just going to go ahead and pursue their unemployment wages so they can find another opportunity. So I would be very careful about across the board just reducing hours. The reduction has to affect at least 10% of the employees in a particular unit. And the shared work program can be affecting some units and not all. So just because you're participating in the shared work program with one division does not mean you have to be a part of it in all the divisions. Can we go to the next slide? I wanted to make sure that we really help the employers understand that, you know, during this process, the employee is going to be receiving both unemployment wages as well as the wages they receive at work. And this is not going to affect the employer's tax rate in any other way as it would as just general other benefit chargebacks. I also provided the email address as well as a phone number, and I had to throw in the actual email address because I think one of the pieces that we get into is we often hear, hey, I'm calling and they're telling me, they're giving me a message back. There's nothing like having something in writing to the state on a certain day that you reached out to ask a certain question. And I got to make sure that you understand that TWC is honoring the dates that you're submitting all your documentation. So if they're backlogged and they can't get a hold of you for 3 days later, that doesn't mean that's when your opportunity to participate starts. They're going to make sure that they take care of any back pay or any type of opportunities that should have been enacted a couple days before. At that website that I sent, you do have the opportunity to go on and create your own employer benefit page. On that page is where you can handle all of the information via the web. It is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week that you can go online and submit this shared work program application. But if we can go to the next slide, I really wanted to make sure that I gave you guys an in-depth example of some of the questions that would be getting asked of you for if you wanted to qualify for the shared work program. Of course, they're going to go through questions like your TW tax account number. The point person that you're going to have to put in this plan is going to be somebody that you really trust with this information, somebody that is going to be available and able to sign a lot of the documents for your company. But some of the major questions that are really, really important is the shared work plan a replacement for a previous plan? They're going to want to know the total number of employees or the unit affected by the reduction. They're going to want to know if this is a seasonal type position, or are the work hours reduced 10% to 40% like we just discussed. So a lot of the stuff you're going to already you're going to evaluate yourself before you even figure out it's time to fill out this plan. But you do have to have a plan. If you take a look on line number 26, how will the affected employees be notified of the share work plan in advance? So it's really, really important to the state that you are communicating, and I'm pretty sure Insperity or anybody can share the information with you about communicating with staff in such a crucial time, and how important it is for you to just be honest and be able to have them involved in the plan as much as possible, because I really do believe that this pandemic will eventually go away. And when it does, work is going to boom. People are going to need more workers than what they even imagined. And at that point, you don't want to have a reputation as an employer that wasn't just communicating things efficiently when stuff hits the fan. So I just wanted to make sure that you understand that when you participate in something like the shared work plan, the representatives in Austin even want to know how are you going to let them know, and you could say in a meeting, you could document, we're going to have a conference call, whatever it is on however you're operating, delivering messages. That's just what they want to know. They want to know the number of estimated employees that who would be laid off if you didn't participate in the shared work program. So all of that is information that you or your point contacts are going to want to have generated for you. So this is the first piece of the application. Now, if you're involved in a union, if you don't mind going to the next slide, this is where you give us union acknowledgement, and it's basically self-explanatory. So after you have this information, you're going to email or fax any of the completed forms to ui.sharedwork@twc.state.tex.us. It's that email that I provided to you on the slide before, and it also gives you an option to fax. But really, I'm just giving you guys some advice. Email is probably the best way to go to show some type of tracking in regards to how you've submitted your application. If you don't mind going to the next slide. And this slide is going to be the actual employee participant list. This is going to be the list that you are physically writing down the name of the employee, their social security number, your organization name, as well as the TWC account number that you're going to have participating on this particular program. Now, when you go to create your profile at that website that I had given you, that's where you're going to communicate with the state weekly. You may be furloughing one week and you may be booming the next. You may furlough for 2 days, and outside of that, your staff is working full time. You're going to want to make sure that at the end of it, you have that information inserted real time into that particular database. So I know that I see a lot of questions coming in via chat right now, and I'm going to make sure I can get to you and at least have you have my contact information. I think at the end I provide everybody with my cell phone number, so you guys can stay in touch. But I think right now it's really important that you get a feel for the types of questions and the type of information you're going to have to gather if you're participating in the shared work program. If you don't mind going to the next slide. Now, I think this is another piece that's really, really, really important, because I've had some employers give me calls over the last couple of days asking about mass claims. What's going on with mass claims? Can they put part-time employees on the mass claims? My advice to you right now is anybody affected at your company, and this is if you have to lay them off, if you have to close shop for a period of time and you're doing mass claims, this is where you really want to focus on streamlining the process. There's a lot of media out there that's talking about the unfavorable experiences for somebody that's applying for unemployment. And there's nothing better that you can do for your staff by helping them bridge that gap. So by providing the mass claims, it streamlines the process and it helps enact some of the unemployment process fast. Now, the job seekers are going to still be responsible for calling in, checking in, setting up an account on Work in Texas to show that they are looking for work if they have to get laid off. But what's really important is that you start that process for them. Once again, you can submit a mass claim 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. But I think what's really, really crucial about this is reaching out to me and being able to say, hey, I have a mass claim that I need to do, but this is not occurring until next week. And I have about 50 people that are going through the process that could really use some help with their resumes, or they can really use some help with interview skills because they've never had that help before. You could even give us some information like, I plan on bringing these individuals back after. So right now, I'd like them to be presented with this information, or is there some type of training that we can have them participate in while they're on unemployment? We're seeing a lot of those requests come across. And when you're on unemployment, as an employee, you have the opportunity to get trainings almost at no cost, working with the community colleges. So I would suggest, if you have something very particular, something that as an employee, as a leader within our community, you're really trying to find out how you can get past this, not just help your employees get past it, but you as a company that needs these hard workers to come back to you, then let's plan. Let's decide to get these guys involved in training that can help them stay engaged until after everything moves forward with Corona. So I want to make sure that you know that these can be paired with virtual presentations on job search services, or we can help that process begin to look for additional training. If you don't mind going to the next slide, please. I added some information here. I did add where you can get more information about it through the TWC office. I added the phone number for the mass claims coordinator, and I also gave you the website to actually submit the mass claim. If you go to the more information website, you can actually download a form that lets you import the information in if it's on an Excel spreadsheet. So I just want to make sure that you as a community know that these are some resources to help you and your employees as you move forward. If you don't mind going to the next slide. Work in Texas, right now in the media, you're kind of, it's a little confusing, because when I see the media and I see unemployment rates have skyrocketed, and immediately they kind of focus on a workforce solutions office. And when they focus on the workforce solutions office, to me, it's a little perplexing, because workforce solutions and the actual Texas Workforce Commissions, we work hand in hand, we're partners. But if you can imagine, one entity is the payroll department, making sure individuals are supplemented with income. That would be the TWC unemployment office. We're the HR department that ensures that if there's open positions out there, if there's training that needs to occur, is there any type of emergency type help that needs to be delivered to employees, that's where we're involved. So when they show that the Workforce Solutions office are closed, most of the time, if an individual went into the office to apply for unemployment, we would guide them to the same phone numbers and websites to have them do it virtually. So I want you guys to know that Work in Texas is the entity that exists right now. That's where Workforce Solutions in Houston, Texas, all of our offices are working behind the scenes. Some of us are teleworking. Some of us are actually in the buildings, I believe up until Monday, because we did have 2 cases that occurred in 2 of our offices where we had no public individuals in there. So one of the good things is that we prepared for this ahead of time, but at the same time, we're trying to protect our staff. So most of our staff will be going to teleworking. However, we're constantly reaching out to employers in the community, asking how they've been affected and taking those postings if they are hiring and then putting them in work in Texas. So for you guys out there that are currently still having recruiting needs, if you're in the logistics field, if you are in a private sector that's really an essential business right now, work in Texas, we can set up a profile for you as an employer because it's a whole new level of recruiting for you now. We can help you recruit and connect with candidates that are looking for employment in your local area. Work in Texas also allows employees to go in and learn how to upload and build their resumes. And we can also take an opportunity to search for training providers. So I just wanted to make sure you guys really understood the resources that were available to you. And if you don't mind going to the last slide. I want to make sure everybody on this call has my contact information and my cell number because everybody's issue is not the same. So feel free to reach out to me at any time. Let me know about your situation and we can definitely get you connected in the right way.
Great, thank you, Michael. I did have a couple of questions for you, and I know you also have an opportunity behind the scenes as well to see those questions in our Q&A box. Do you have, one of the questions is basically timeline. You haven't laid anyone off. You are considering it. What's kind of your guidance there? I think you may have referred to it already in your slides.
Yeah, you're just going to want to stay proactive. I think it's always a good rule of business to help your employees stay as comfortable as possible in this time and be proactive about it. There's no timeline, but if you told us 2 weeks from now you're having a layoff, we'll be more than happy to start some of these presentations virtually, whether it's resume help, whether it's interviewing help, or just knowledge about how to get through the unemployment world out there. So yeah, proactive is always good.
Okay. And then in terms of, we're all learning to be very virtual and very digital at this time. What happens if we don't necessarily have access to this information digitally? Is there another way of getting access to the documents?
Yes, on the TWC website, you can download everything. I believe it's in a Word document to where you can type in the information or import it via Excel, and then you can also email that or fax that information over.
Okay, and then one other question for you before we move on to Insperity, and I'll give you a chance to also look at the questions in the Q&A. I mean, knowing that you're not legal and you don't want to offer recommendations, how does the CARE Act and the PPP impact decisions, or is there anything that would be advised in terms of an employer's decision to file a claim for a mass claim or to utilize one of those programs?
I don't believe they discount each other. I'd like for employers to look at this as layers of support. I think we're often hearing time is of the essence, and if you're not getting in there applying for that money, is there going to be money left for you? So I can tell you, just as we speak, I'm getting text messages of other programs that are getting put together and loan programs that are on top of all of the stuff that was recently released. So I look forward to bringing back some of that information, but I would want employers to look at this as layers of support. If you don't qualify for one or you're not able to get in on time for one, let's look for another form of support. But they all seem to be taking care of either payroll expenses or rent expenses or utility expenses.
All right, great. Michael, thank you so much. Please stay with us. And Michael has already agreed that at the end of the program, he'll stick around for about 5 minutes to answer questions privately through the chat or the Q&A. But Michael, again, thank you so much for joining us. I know you've got a lot going on right now, a lot on your plate. All right, thank you. We're gonna bring Jeff Sorrells and Bonnie Monych up with Insperity. I think we'll start with Bonnie right now to just run through a couple of communication practices for the HR community as well and employers. And then we'll go through some scenarios. Bonnie, welcome.
Afternoon. I hope everybody's doing well this afternoon. one of the things that I wanted to start out with was talking about communication. Right now, it's so very important that we communicate with all of our employees as much as we can, and also being transparent. You know, we talk about this a lot in different situations, but right now in this particular time of crisis, we really need to think about communication and how we are communicating with people. It's critical right now. So the best thing we can do is to always communicate honestly with someone. Make sure that you let them know what's going on and communicate frequently with them. Also, try to remember not everyone is technically competent, if you will. And so you've got to remember that there may be different channels that you need to use when you communicate with your employees. So remember, we do have email, we do have text, we do have obviously virtual meetings. So keep in mind your audience always as you're communicating. And employees want to know that they are still connected to your organization. So use some type of virtual meetings as often as you can so that people can actually see the other person and connect. I know that in Insperity, we have these twice a week team meetings where we're just really checking in so everybody can kind of see each other and try to bring back some type of normalcy. Let's go to the next slide. So remember what the H stands for in human resources. We see the words HR all the time in everything we do. So keep in mind what that H stands for. It stands for human. We are all humans. So humans are emotional, and most of us, we can be very logical at times, but we also have different types of emotions. So keep in mind, this is a time for you to listen to your employees, for you to make sure that they speak to one another as well, and that they share with you how they're feeling, what they're going through. If they have any particular issues or problems, this is the time that you need to encourage them to share that with you. It's very, very important. And also keep in mind, everybody is processing this situation differently. Some people are more concerned than others. And so you need to remember that each and every human is individual. We're all very different. We have needs, different needs at different times. And most importantly, remember that when this passes, and it will, your employees need to feel like you were loyal to them, they were loyal to you, everybody pulled together, and they were all a part of resolving the situation. That goes a long way when this passes. So your employees know that you do really care about them. So Jeff, I'm going to let you take over from now.
Thank you very much, Bonnie. That was well said on the communication part. So what I want to speak to today is a lot of scenarios regarding the FFCRA. So just a real brief overview. Most of you are probably familiar with this. This was made effective April 1st, and it's only good right now until December 31st of 2020. Keep in mind that as we're going through the scenarios and the background on this, when most legislation is passed, especially employment legislation like this, the business world usually gets 30, 60, 90 days to comment and to get further guidance on this. We as HR professionals at Insperity, and I'm sure across the nation, are finding that we're getting guidance every day from the Department of Labor on clarity of these things regarding the FFCRA. But just in a nutshell, it's an extension of the Family Medical Leave Act, okay? So where it extends is for specific COVID-19 situations. So as we know, FMLA usually applies to only 50 or more employees with a company that size. But now with a COVID situation, and we'll talk about those in a minute, it applies to those with 30 employees, 20 employees, even lower. We also know with regular FMLA, an employee usually has to be with the company at least a year. Well, now for specific COVID situations, whether they've been diagnosed or they're having to take care of an individual or a family member, that has been reduced to newly hired employees or 30 days, depending on the situation. And It also provides now paid leave. As we know, regular FMLA does not require the leave to be paid in any form or fashion unless that employee maybe has PTO, vacation, or sick time. So there are paid provisions to this act, which we'll go over briefly. Next slide. So if we look at the paid part of this, which is probably the most newest part to this whole thing, is it can be broken down into basically two different sections. The first three bullet points apply directly to your employee. So if they have been quarantined or asked to isolate by a healthcare provider, or they're experiencing symptoms or have been diagnosed, per the act, they can receive 100% of their pay for up to 80 hours. I've had clients ask me, well, we've just reduced our workforce to a 6-hour workday and we have somebody that's diagnosed. So do I pay them 8 hours a day or is it a total of 80 hours? My advice to them, per the legislation, it said 80 hours. It did not go into pay by the day because the client was worried about paying the person that was sick 8 hours a day when the people that were working could only make 6 hours a day. So there's nuances like that that you have to work through with this. And then of course, the last three parts are a little more ambiguous, I guess you could say, a little bit harder to manage. Specifically point 5 there where it's caring for a child. A lot of my clients have been struggling with that, and we're going to talk about that here in a little bit with some of the scenarios. But a lot of my clients are also concerned that their employees are going to take advantage of that. So next slide. So let's just get into some real quick FAQs and scenarios so that we can stay on time. A few of these at the beginning are things that I've dealt with personally as an HR professional with my clients at Insperity. And one thing that came out big time when this all broke out 2 or 3 weeks ago, can I take the temperature of my employees to determine if they may have the illness? Well, in the beginning, before March 18th, the EEOC was saying, we don't recommend that for privacy issues. Do you have somebody that's properly trained, et cetera, et cetera. Well, then March 18th, the EEOC worked with the CDC saying, it's okay to take employees' temperatures now, but it's still not a foolproof solution. And what they meant by that is you still have the privacy issues. Is somebody properly trained? How do you handle an employee that if they refuse to have their temperature taken? And as we've learned, you know, from the experts with this virus, you can still be asymptomatic and be a carrier. So just taking the temperature was not a foolproof solution. So I just wanted to share that with you, that the EEOC has been working with the CDC, and as we've all said, things are changing on a daily basis. Am I required to pay my employees who are not working due to a quarantine? If the employee has been quarantined by a health provider per the act, they are due 80 hours of paid sick leave. What do I do if an employee feels that they contracted COVID-19 virus while performing their duties at work? I haven't had this question yet with my clients, but I'm sure it will come up, and some of you maybe have experienced this. My advice to them is if you have a good employee handbook, HR infrastructure, policies and procedures in place, you already have what you need to address this. If an employee feels they have been injured or become ill while performing their duties, it is best practice to report that to your workers' comp carrier and let them determine benefits eligibility, should it be covered, et cetera, because now you've done your due diligence as an employer in the state of Texas to report that to your insurance carrier. Next slide. So I'm going to kind of summarize this one here a little bit, okay? But you have a male employee of the airline industry, and he's now teleworking. He needs to take his mother out of a nursing facility and care for her at home because she has been exposed but not tested for the virus. He has been instructed he can move her and he will be caring for her in his home. So the first question is, does he qualify for emergency paid leave? Well, without knowing all the details, I would really need to go back and ask a lot more questions. What is the reason he is moving her? Is he moving her because the home she's in has advised him that he needs to be moved? If that's the case, then it probably would qualify for emergency paid leave, because there's a good possibility that he is now taking care of somebody that has or has possibly been self-quarantined. And that's the big question. We don't know if his mother's been self-quarantined either. Does he qualify for emergency FMLA? Once again, it depends on what instructions his mother's doctor or the house gave to him, whether or not it's emergency FMLA. If it's not emergency FMLA, it could still be regular FMLA, because he's having to take care of his mother. And then of course it says, if yes, what are the options for his 10 days of unpaid time if he qualifies? As we stated earlier, the way the regs read, it's 80 hours. I'm not sure if it's 10 days. Once again, we need a little bit of clarification on that going forward. The same employee above 4 months ago took FMLA for the birth of a child and used 4 weeks. Can he apply 12 weeks for the care of his mother? From what we have read, the 12 weeks is 12 weeks over a 12-month period. So if he took 4 weeks for the birth of his child a few months ago, within the last 12 months, he really only has 8 weeks of FMLA job protection to take care of his mother. Next slide. An employee is teleworking. May they take paid sick leave or expanded family and medical leave intermittently while teleworking? Well, the guidance from the Department of Labor on that says that it is up to the employer on whether or not they can allow this type of leave to be intermittent. My advice to my clients is, how do you handle a salaried employee who maybe had to step out 6 months ago and go to the dentist at 2 o'clock and they came back at 3? What are you really looking for? Are they getting their work done? If they're getting their work done, it's really not a benefit to you, the employer, administratively, to keep up with that 1 hour now that they maybe had to spend with their kid doing homework or doing with schoolwork. Plus, you're only required to pay them at 2/3 of pay. So from a salaried exempt employee, it's best just to say, are you getting your work done? We all have interruptions when we're in our normal working mode. Next slide. My manufacturing plant closed the work site before April 1st, the effective date of FFCRA. Are we required to go back and give paid sick leave or expanded family and medical leave to employees that needed that? From our understanding and research, no. Everything was effective April 1st. I can tell you at Insperity, we had to set up pay codes for our clients to properly track this paid sick leave so that our clients can get their tax breaks back. And we went live with everything on that April 1st for our clients. Our work site needs to reduce work schedules to maintain business operations. An employee has just reported symptoms of COVID-19. Is he now eligible for FFCR paid leave to supplement the hours that he is not working? No. The Department of Labor has been very clear. If there is no work available for that employee, which is part of that affected department, then if there is no work available, then even if they are diagnosed, they are not eligible for the paid sick leave. Next slide. We received a request from an employee with an underlying medical condition to work from a different location to reduce potential exposure. If it is not possible or a reasonable accommodation to telework because of their responsibilities, do we have to put them on paid leave? So once again, we need more details on this. And my question back to the employee would be, so what is your doctor saying? Okay, is the primary reason you need to work remotely because of your current medical condition, which is not COVID related, or does he feel that your medical condition could really worsen if exposed to the virus? So once again, we need more information on this. And my recommendation, especially in these tough situations, which can be unique on their own, is kind of like what we do as HR professionals with the Americans with Disability Act. There's the interactive process. So an employee has come to you with this medical situation they have. So we need to ask more questions. Well, what does that mean? What kind of accommodations do you need? Is that something you feel you need, or is your doctor recommending it? So once again, we may need to ask more questions to get to the bottom of the best solution. An employee has reported that she is suffering from depression and anxiety triggered by this pandemic. This is more aligned with her mental wellness, and she is requesting emergency leave to care for her mental health, and has a doctor's order advising she not return to work for 4 weeks. Does this qualify for FMLA? If so, how do we handle it? If not, what resources can we provide? So this is a very common thing that I'm hearing from some of my clients, whether they are suffering from depression or no depression at all. Once again, I think we would need to ask this employee, you know, what is your doctor saying? Is the COVID-19 issue exacerbating the current depression that you already have and anxiety you already have? Once we get more information on that, would determine whether or not what type of FMLA or emergency FMLA it might or need to be. Also, as Bonnie was talking about earlier, you know, we need to be compassionate, and many of you maybe have access to an employee assistance program. This would be very, very important, you know, to remind those employees of, if they're dealing with depression or anxiety, to remind them of that resource. I've actually had a few clients where employees just say, look, I just don't feel comfortable coming to work because I'm afraid I'm going to contract the virus. I know you're doing everything you can to keep us safe, Mr. or Mrs. Employer, but I just don't feel safe. I've advised those clients to put those people on a personal leave of absence because it's the employee's choice not to come to work, even though there is work available. None of my clients have obviously terminated those people, and they don't want to terminate them, but I've advised them they really need to honor the employee's feelings. And if they don't want to come to work, then we'll excuse those absences for the next few weeks. Next slide. What if your benefits are better than the Act? For sick employees, use the first 5 days of their own PTO, then have short-term disability at 100%, then 75% for the next 6 weeks. It would seem that your sick coverage is also for caring for others that are sick, and now there's a lot of moving parts with this. If I'm answering this correctly, our advice on this from the paid sick leave part of the extension of the FMLA Act is that needs to be used first before any employer provided benefit such as PTO, vacation, sick, or disability is used, because this is a federal regulation. And from the guidance we've gotten, that they don't want employees to use their other benefits that are provided by the company when the federal government is offering these for those situations. Next slide, I'm sorry.
No, we've wrapped up on those, Jeff. Thank you. And we do have some additional questions from our audience in the Q&A. And I would, just because we're running out of time, I would ask our panelists to go ahead and take a look at those questions in the Q&A and answer them if they can at this time. And if not, we will be going through all of the questions and seeking answers, or at least a place to direct you to. I think, Jeff, in a wrap up, you and I talked a little bit about a resource that Insperity has for its clients, but also that is open to the public. Did you want to share anything about that?
Yes, thank you, Carrie. If you go to Insperity.com, we have a huge banner across our website that has a COVID resource for anyone that's interested in becoming a client of ours, and what we're doing for our clients. There's also a message there from our president and CEO, Paul Servati, on what we've been doing the last 3 weeks. It is just incredible. Our payroll, I will have to give a huge kudos in regards to the CARES Act part of it. Our payroll department and our finance department and accounting department, within about, I want to say, a 72-hour period, was able to put together 2 reports of payroll data that was exactly what our clients needed to go for some of these specific loans that opened up last Friday. So if you're interested, you can definitely check us out at Insperity.com.
Okay, Jeff, stay with me for just a second. You know, as it relates to furloughed employees, Do employers still owe them for paid sick leave hours?
I saw that in the question thing. Let me bring that up. That's a good one that I'd like to address. Thank you, Carrie. So no, if your employees have been furloughed right now, say effective yesterday, Wednesday, and you have an employee that told you yesterday that they've been diagnosed with COVID or been asked to self-quarantine, and they're part of that group that has been furloughed, no, you do not owe them the paid sick leave, because if they were available to work, there is no work for them to do, okay? There's also another one, Carrie, I'd like to answer live.
Okay.
Says, if my employees are under a county stay-at-home order, do I have to pay them the 80 hours of paid sick leave? No, a stay-at-home order does not equate to paid sick leave.
Okay. This next one, and we can pull it over into a private conversation later, but you know, these come down to sometimes just ultimately an individual situation with their employer, and not necessarily has anything to do with COVID. But you know, if an employee is currently working from home, and I don't know if this question is related to the fact that they already are remote, approved to remote work. However, the employer needs them to come back and work in the center, and that employee refuses. Would this just be a scenario of a typical situation, COVID-19, you know, besides, you know, this being a particular issue around COVID-19?
Once again, if we put the COVID-19 situation into this question where the employee is refusing to come to work, the key with this whole situation is flexibility. And as I described earlier, I think in one of the scenarios, I've had 3 or 4 of my clients where an employee just doesn't feel safe reporting to work because of the situation, even though there's work that needs to be done and their department has to be there, okay? So my clients, they're like, I don't want to terminate them. They just put them on a leave of absence, completely unpaid, completely unpaid.
Great. Thank you so much, Jeff. I think that's the last of our questions from our audience, but I know in the chat feature, some of you have been asking some additional questions. Our panelists have agreed to stay on the call for a few minutes after we conclude, so please feel free to submit additional comments or questions. And that kind of wraps up the formal part of the program. I did want to just mention here that we do have several additional events coming up that are part of this COVID-19 series. If you'd like to join us next week, Patrick Jankowski with the Greater Houston Partnership is going to be delivering another economic update. He presented a week ago, or excuse me, a week ago, yes, and he'll be doing this every 2 weeks. He's going to give a current economic analysis and a scenario situation. Patrick also takes questions from the audience. He's very good about responding to your individual questions. We also, again, are reconvening our business development groups, our BRGs, and tomorrow morning we have one from 9 to 10 a.m. It's a virtual networking event, and with a topic, and then we also have another one for next Friday. So you'll be seeing those regularly every Friday, and we'll be adding to these lists of activities for development and also learning as well. Appreciate your time today. Please join us again. We will be sharing our list of upcoming events in a weekly calendar. Our event site is going to start being populated again with all of our virtual events and meetings and additional information for you to join us. So thank you again for your participation. Please feel free to stay on and in the chat or the Q&A function with our panelists. Thank you.